The Garden Report is powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network.
Hey, Bobby Manning here. Welcome to a practice edition of the Garden Report, the final practice before the East Finals begin. And we have an opponent, Josue.
Yeah, we do.
It's Indiana. We're not getting, as I expressed my disappointment on our studio edition last night, New York.
I'm so upset, man. We'll talk about it another time, though.
But the matchup might be more intriguing, especially given the injuries the Knicks had going into what would have been a really uphill battle for them competing in this series. I think the way the Pacers are going to compete here is pretty evident. They're going to run, they're going to try to score a ton and win the shot battle, and they did a pretty good job of that throughout the year. And that's obviously, as we get into our three keys to the series here, number one, I think, is controlling that pace, not making this a race to 130, and trying to figure out how you can outscore and defend the Pacers at the same time. Defending, I think, is going to be tougher said than done. A lot of talk about getting back, transition defense, which I think is smart here. But that's going to be the big one by far, is not making this a track meet, not making this a race to 150. I know Derek White just said, if we got to score 150, we'll do it, but I don't see it being that way. So they're obviously pretty attuned to that. What is your key to the series?
Well, that's a big one, considering just how they got here, right? The Indiana Pacers just straight up outplaying the Knicks in that second half, outscoring them in many ways, because that's what they want the Celtics to do, right? They want to go out and get into that track meet, and that's exactly what the Celtics shouldn't do. But for me, it's more of the mental aspect, which was a lot of quotes coming from the Auerbach Center talked about that in terms of being ready mentally. And I think a big part of that is not falling into this narrative of, oh, you're expected to win this series. You know, you're the heavy favorite. Even though you don't have Kristaps Porzingis, like, you're supposed to win this series. And that's something that Jaylen Brown talked about here at the Auerbach Center, that they cannot fall into that narrative, into thinking that it's supposed to be quote unquote easy. And I know that's been something that's been discussed throughout the first couple of rounds, where the Celtics, you know, turned in those losses, respective losses in those Game 2 matchups against those teams. However, I think it rings true against this Indiana Pacers team more so when you think about how they got here. And, you know, if you're the Celtics, you can't fall into that trap of not taking these guys seriously, and at least on a play-by-play basis. That's got to stand throughout the entire series. And I think you got to set the tone in a big way in that Game 1, which I'm not concerned about when you think about, you know, the Pacers coming off their Game 7 and the Celtics having all that rest. However, it has to go throughout the entire series. And if you're the Indiana Pacers, like they say, all you have to do is steal one. And that's exactly what the Celtics cannot allow these guys to do here in Boston.
And even if they do, Jaylen here talking about the response to that, the response to the noise, a lot of different talk about just how to mentally handle some of the things you might run into throughout the series. Here's him talking about that.
Majority of it is just navigating emotion, like just being able to stay consistent. You know, you're going to make shots, you're going to miss shots, that's a part of it. But if you allow the pressure to kind of get to you, the tension builds. You know, you hear the crowd go, oh, every time you miss. You know, I think that just builds up and it gives the team momentum. Like, you just got to navigate your emotions and take it one possession at a time. And I feel like you'll always have a chance to win if you don't get caught up in the emotion of the game, the emotion of the crowd, or the emotion of the media, or whatever it goes. Just come out, play each and every possession with the best intentions possible, come ready to fight every single night, every single possession, and I feel like you'll be in a good spot. That's what I say to my team. Let's just navigate our emotions as best we can.
Yeah, so a ton of talk from Jaylen about not looking at the TV, not hearing the noise, not reacting to the crowd, saying, oh, when you miss a shot. And the runs. Peyton Pritchard talked about that a little bit yesterday, too, not allowing a 7-0 run to become a 15-0 run and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's clearly been a focus for this team. We talked a lot about that mental aspect yesterday.
I feel like Jaylen Brown's been like the Celtics' like subconscious thoughts, like things that they cannot do, things that I feel like maybe a lot of the players don't always bring up. Jaylen's always going to remind guys like, hey, we can't do this, we can't do that. Like, he's always the guy's going to remind them of their bad habits. And he's right. He's 100% correct going into this series. You want to set that tone in a dominating fashion if you can. I mean, you have the advantage. You've had all these days off, and you look at the way Jaylen and Tatum ended that series. I'm expecting that type of energy to carry over, you know, in terms of them being aggressive, taking those matchups. Yeah. They have to be, Bobby, in the sense of just attacking, you know, getting to the free throw line, making the Indiana Pacers work hard on that end of the defensive side. Because if you start relying on easier shots and not playing the entire 24 seconds. That's what the Pacers want you to do, because they will capitalize off those missed shots, off those fast break opportunities. And you don't want to get someone like Halliburton getting the good side of Halliburton that we haven't seen consistently throughout the playoffs, but best believe he will be revved up for this series, his very first appearance in the Eastern Conference Finals. So, Jaylen talked about that, and he also talked about the biggest difference of this team compared to the other teams. This is his 6th appearance in the Eastern Conference Finals, and at the end of the day, it comes down to the experience. These guys have a whole lot of it. Even guys who had just joined the team this year, Drew Holiday obviously is a champion. He won a ring a few years ago with the Milwaukee Bucks. All those experiences, that's what should really be, at the end of the day, the big advantage in this series.
Yeah, and you talked about the offense. You got to set the tone with offense, make Halliburton work, attack him repeatedly. It's going to be tougher without Kristaps Porzingis, because the Pacers don't allow you to shoot as many threes as other teams. So where's that place Horford? I think he's going to have to sustain throughout this series. This might not be as much of a Cornet series. So do you see a little Tillman at that point? All these guys have to be threats offensively against the Pacers, because you can't allow them to hide Halliburton anywhere. You can't allow them to hide some of their weaker defenders. And Celtics did a good job attacking Nesmith during the year. The numbers were pretty good against him, and he's probably their best defender, at least on the perimeter. So they did a good job during the regular season. Tatum averaged 32 against this team. Brown had success, and Horford, I think, can find other ways to get involved if his three isn't there. So being a threat offensively, I think, is probably the third key to this series, and making that Pacers defense work, because even in the playoffs, it hasn't been great. It's like a 118 defensive rating after it was 119 early in the season when it was bottom 10. So still not a good defensive unit, but they take away the threes. As Joe said, they stay home on shooters. So I think a big thing is just going to the rim. That's probably going to be key in this series.
Yeah, I mean, you have the advantage in these guys when they're in attack mode, when they're going downhill. I mean, we saw, especially in that Cleveland Cavaliers series, just the gap, when the offense is triggering. I mean, when the offense is dialed in the way they were in that closeout game. It did get interesting until they finally created that separation, but I think that you can't do that with this Pacers team, especially because they'll make you pay. I mean, they have guys that come off the bench that can score in a hurry as well. I feel like this is easiestly probably the toughest matchup the Celtics are going to face, at least in the Eastern Conference. So
because they're healthy, they're relatively healthy too.
Right, and especially going into it without Kristaps, which, if I had to guess, probably going to miss a handful of games in the series. Who knows if we see him when the series shifts over to Indiana for games 3 and 4. But the Celtics can't think about that. They have to think about what's in front of them, and just continue to be aggressive on the defensive end of the floor, because you don't want to have those type of games where you're allowing 125 or 130. I mean, that's what the Pacers can do if they find their stride, and all of a sudden you find yourself on the wrong side of a humongous run.
Yeah, Porzingis didn't practice today, so we'll continue to keep an eye on his status and where that's going. That's all we learned about his progression here today, and we'll see where it goes going forward. We'll have a full preview show as well tonight, so stay tuned for that here on Celtics All Access. Get all the player quotes from today and yesterday here on CLNS Media. Subscribe for coverage throughout the series here and in Indiana. He's Josue Pavon. I'm Bobby Manning. This has been a practice edition of the Garden Report. Game 1 is 8 o'clock tomorrow. Pacers Celtics.
What's going on, everyone? It's Josue Pavon here. If you made it this far, that means you really enjoyed this video. Make sure you follow all of our social media platforms at Celtics CLNS, and of course, follow us here on YouTube.